All right, ready to dive into another mystery?
Always. Let's hear it.
This one takes us to the Australian outback,
Okay, I'm intrigued.
the Murchison region of Western Australia, to be exact. Think vast distances, red dirt, and the rabbit-proof fence.
Thousands of kilometers long, trying to hold back all those rabbits.
Exactly. Built to keep them out, but also creating a unique backdrop for the crime we're exploring.
A crime on a massive, desolate stage. Sounds fascinating.
It is. We've got court transcripts, newspaper articles, and even a book written by someone who was right there in the middle of it all.
Wow, first-hand account. That's pretty rare.
We're untangling the Murchison murders, a case that really gripped Australia back in the early 1930s.
To really get it, though, you have to picture the outback back then, especially along the rabbit-proof fence.
Isolated, right?
Incredibly. It was a world of its own. Communication was tough. People came and went all the time,
Perfect for a crime to go unnoticed.
at least for a while.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. The disappearance of not one, but three men.
3. This is getting complicated.
It is. First, there's Louis Caron. Well, that wasn't his real name.
An alias.
Yep, adding to the intrigue. His real name was Leslie George Brown,
Okay.
a New Zealander, well-educated, trying for a fresh start in Western Australia.
What brought him to the outback?
He was separated from his wife, looking for a new life. Like so many others during the Depression, he thought he might find work along the rabbit-proof fence.
Tough times. A lot of people were desperate.
Definitely. And things weren't easy for Louis. He pawned his belongings, even sent telegrams asking for money.
Trying to scrape by.
Eventually, he met up with another man, Jack Lemon. They decided to travel together looking for work. Weeks in the outback, sleeping in sand dunes, tough conditions. It was a last resort for many.
I can't imagine. Just hoping for a chance.
They finally get to Mount Magnet, and Louis finds some work.
Any luck?
Temporary. The Depression hit, and he was out of a job again. He decided to go visit Jack
Where was Jack?
at a place called the Fountain Out Camp, a remote stockman's hut. Basically, isolation within isolation.
So to visit Jack, he had to journey even deeper into the outback.
Days of travel just to get there.
Wow. Okay, and at the Fountain Out camp, who does Louis meet?
A man named Snowy Rolls, a skilled bushman and dogger.
Dogger meaning.
He specialized in catching wild dogs.
Okay, so Snowy's a local. What's his role in all this?
He offers Louis work. And that's where things start to get a bit darker.
I see. Snowy seems helpful on the surface.
Exactly. Appearances can be deceiving, right?
Often are.
But here's the thing. Before Louis leaves with Snowy, he does some interesting things.
Hi, what?
Buys back his suit from the pawn shop, has his watches repaired, even buys new hair clippers.
Sounds like he was planning for the future. Not to vanish.
Exactly. It's May 18th, 1930. Louis sets off with Snowy, tells Jack he'll be back in 5 weeks.
5 weeks, come and go.
Nothing. No Louis.
Red flag.
Huge one. Jack's worried, sends a telegram to Snowy, no reply. Then finally, a letter arrives from Snowy.
And what does it say?
Full of excuses. It says Louis went to Geraldton, but when Jack checks, nothing. No sign of him.
So Snowy's being evasive.
And remember, Louis's friend back in New Zealand, he reports Louis missing to the police too.
2 missing person reports thousands of miles apart, same guy.
Leading back to this remote corner of Australia, December 1930, Constable Hearn in Mount Magnet decides to investigate.
About time. What's he find?
Teams up with Constable MacArthur, a bushman, and they retrace Louis and Snowy's steps.
Like finding a needle in a haystack, I imagine.
They end up at a remote campsite by the 183-mile gate of the rabbit-proof fence
Okay.
and a burnt-out fire pit. Chilling discovery.
What's in the fire pit?
Bone fragments, teeth, a button, metal eyelets, even a wedding ring.
Oh, wow. This is more than a missing person case now.
Much more. It's clear something terrible has happened. This fire site becomes the center of the investigation, but the outback is vast, and they need expertise.
So who do they call?
Detective Sergeant Harry Manning, top investigator from Perth. Meticulous, doesn't miss a thing.
He's got his work cut out for him.
He examines everything at the fire site. The size, the intensity, tire tracks.
Looking for any clue.
Even finds ash piles that were deliberately moved, like someone was trying to hide something.
Trying to cover their tracks.
The dentures they find. They get sent all the way to Louis' dentist in New Zealand. A match. Incredible, really. Early forensic science connecting those ashes to Louis.
Wow. That's definitive.
Then there's the wedding ring.
Oh, right. You mentioned that earlier.
Louis' estranged wife confirms it's his. A jeweler identifies the maker's mark. No doubt now.
The ring becomes a tragic symbol, a piece of evidence.
It all points to Snowy rolls. They trace Louis's belongings. Everything leads back to Snowy. The watches, the way they were packed, even those new hair clippers. But just as they're zeroing in on Snowy, they learn about two other missing men.
Two more. This is getting more complicated by the minute.
James Ryan, a tough ex-sailor, and George Lloyd, a mechanic from Adelaide.
Okay, so are these disappearances connected or just a coincidence?
Well, Snowy's connected to both of them. He was seen driving James's Dodge truck, and George Lloyd. He was last seen with James and Snowy.
So we have three missing men, and Snowy is the common denominator.
It's a web, and Snowy's right at the center.
And remember that author I mentioned, Arthur Upfield? He's writing a murder mystery right there in the Murchison.
Yeah, what a coincidence, right? A real-life mystery happening around him while he's writing one.
It gets weirder. Upfield is struggling with a specific plot point.
Oh.
He wants to write a murder mystery without a body. But how do you get rid of the body without leaving a trace? That's his dilemma.
So while a real murder mystery is unfolding, he's trying to figure out how to dispose of a fictional body.
The irony is thick.
So what did he do?
He asks a friend, George Ritchie, for ideas, and George suggests something chilling.
Let me guess. Something a little too close to home.
Burning the body, sifting the ashes, crushing the bones. Eerily similar to what happened to Louis, don't you think?
Way too similar.
Could Upfield's writing somehow inspire a real crime? It's a question that's been debated for years.
It makes you wonder. And to add fuel to the fire, Arthur offers a reward.
A reward? For what?
For anyone who can find a flaw in this disposal method. And guess who's part of these conversations?
Snowy. Of course, right in the middle of it.
Meanwhile, Detective Manning keeps digging. Finds more fire sites at a place called Chailey Bore.
What's he find there?
More metal eyelets like the ones from Louis's boots. And fragments of an accordion.
Didn't George Lloyd play the accordion?
The very same. It's a pattern, and it all points to Snowy.
Wow.
Manning is certain Snowy's responsible for all three murders.
But Snowy's still out there, right?
For now. But there's another twist. Turns out Snowy isn't who he claims to be. His real name is John Thomas Smith.
An alias on top of everything else.
An escaped convict. History of theft and deceit. A master manipulator.
Wow. Talk about a wolf in sheep's clothing.
When they finally catch him, he gives himself away. Says, "You know very well who I am, and if I had known who you were, you wouldn't have got me so easily."
Sounds like a confession to me.
It was a slip of the mask. But it was just the start of a long legal battle. They interrogate him, ask him about Louis, James, George.
And what's his story?
Lies. Conflicting stories, full of holes, can't keep them straight.
Classic con man, thinking he can talk his way out of it.
They charge him with Louis's murder, hold a coroner's inquest to figure out how Louis died.
Coroner's inquest.
It's like a legal proceeding when the cause of death is uncertain.
Ah, I see.
Witnesses come from everywhere. Even Lou's ex-wife and dentist travel from New Zealand.
They're not giving up.
And it's all there. The testimony, the dental records, that wedding ring, all pointing to Snowy.
Powerful symbol, that ring. Witness to a crime.
February 1932, the inquest concludes. Louis is dead, and Snowy's responsible.
So the trial begins.
March 1932. The trial starts, and it's a media frenzy. Everyone's talking about it.
A real outback thriller unfolding in the courtroom.
The prosecution lays it all out, the firesides, the bone fragments, the belongings.
Building their case piece by piece.
Arthur Upfield testifies, too. Talks about his conversations with Snowy, those chilling similarities to his novel.
Can you imagine being Upfield? Seeing your fiction mirrored in reality? Must have been unsettling.
The prosecution dismantles Snowy's alibi, brings in witnesses to contradict him. It's airtight.
And what about Snowy? What's his defense?
He takes the stand, denies everything, sticks to his story.
But all lies, right.
Exactly. Weak explanations. The jury sees right through them. A couple of hours, that's all they need to reach a verdict.
And the verdict is?
Guilty. The evidence, especially the ring, is too damning. Snowy's lawyer appeals. Says the evidence about James and George shouldn't be included, that Upfield's testimony prejudiced the jury.
Does it work?
No. The appeals are rejected. The evidence is clear. Snowy's going to prison.
Yeah.
But then another twist.
More twists. This case is full of them.
A group called the Groper Brotherhood starts protesting the death penalty.
A moral dilemma. Is the death penalty ever justified?
They argue it's not right in this case, especially because James and George's bodies were never found.
Adding another layer to this complex story.
They launch a petition to commute Snowy's sentence. It gains a lot of support. But then, another bombshell.
Don't tell me. Another confession.
Snowy's lawyer announces that Snowy has confessed.
Hmm.
But it's not what you think.
Okay, what is it then?
Snowy claims Louis accidentally ate poisoned bait meant for foxes. He panicked, knew his past would make him look guilty, so he burned the body.
Shifting the blame, trying to make it an accident.
Exactly, trying to save his own skin. But does anyone believe him?
Is it credible after all the lies?
Public opinion is divided. In Perth, the petition against his execution explodes.
People want to believe him.
But out in the Murchison, people who knew Snowy see it for what it is. Another lie.
They know his character.
The authorities aren't convinced either. They refuse to commute his sentence. The petition fails.
So what happens to Snowy?
His execution date is set. In the days leading up to it, he writes letters maintaining his innocence.
Still playing the victim.
But he hints that he knows more about James and George than he's letting on. Even expresses regret for not confessing sooner, but never admits to their murders.
Is it genuine remorse or a final act of manipulation?
Hard to say. June 13th, 1932. Snowy Rolls, a.k.a. John Thomas Smith, is hanged at Fremantle Prison.
That's it then. End of the line for Snowy.
His reported final words were, "I did not kill Louis Caron." What about James and George? He takes that secret to the grave.
And what happens to Snowy's belongings?
His estate, including that Dodge truck, goes to his mother. She tries to sell it, but the police hold on to it. They say it belongs to James Ryan's estate.
A reminder that the impact of Snowy's crimes lives on, even after his death. But what about the other victims?
James and George are declared legally dead, but their bodies are never found. No one is ever charged with their murders.
So the Murchison murders are officially closed, but not really solved. Did Snowy act alone? What really happened?
Questions that linger, unanswered. Secrets hidden in the vast outback. It's strange, isn't it? Snowy's execution really puts Arthur Upfield in the spotlight.
Almost like a morbid publicity boost?
His books, especially the ones with Detective Bonies, they become super popular.
Maybe people saw a connection, the real-life case and Upfield stories.
Upfield even writes a book about the case. The Murchison Murders gives his take on the whole thing.
Wow, a book about the case he was a part of. That's meta.
He knew Snowy, knew the area. His insights are valuable, definitely adds another layer to the story.
The tragedy that propelled his career, in a way.
Upfield becomes one of Australia's most famous crime writers.
Still read today. He really captured the outback, the people, that sense of mystery.
And what about the rabbit-proof fence? Silent witness to it all.
Parts of it are still standing, though it didn't really stop the rabbits in the end. Some sections were just abandoned.
Didn't quite work as planned.
Massive effort, though, trying to control nature. Sometimes we just can't, no matter how hard we try.
Camel Station, where Upfield worked, it was added to the Western Australia Heritage Register.
Back in 2018, recognizing its link to the murders, those tough lives along the fence.
History is embedded in the landscape, even in these remote places. So, what are your takeaways from this deep dive?
The outback is vast, isolated. People were desperate during the Depression. Chance encounters can change everything, and deceit can have deadly consequences.
Justice was served eventually, but those unanswered questions. What happened to James and George?
Why didn't Snowy confess to those murders? Maybe he took those secrets to the grave.
The outback keeps its secrets. This whole case, it's unsettling. The darkness that can exist anywhere, the power of the outback.
And the power of stories, too. Fiction blurring with reality. Did Upfield's imagination influence Snowy? It's a disturbing thought.
If you're intrigued, look into the Murchison Murders. Read Upfield's books. It's a world of mystery, waiting to be explored.
A world where fiction and reality sometimes collide.